I got a second job at the local gas station. On this day, I was working the late shift. It was a little before midnight, and the streets were quiet and fewer customers came in. To keep busy, I was stocking shelves and sweeping the floor. A customer walked in. It was a man, tall and imposing, with a weird glint in his eyes. He gave me a nod and a creepy smile as he browsed the aisles. Something about him just seemed off to me. But I tried to focus on my tasks, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease as the man lingered near the checkout counter. He kept staring at me, his gaze unnerving and unwavering. I thought that he may try something like try to rob me. I greeted him politely and asked if he needed any help, but he just smirked and said he was fine. I felt a knot form in my stomach as he continued to hover around, making me increasingly uncomfortable. As the minutes ticked by, his behavior became more aggressive. He started making lewd comments and advances, ignoring my polite refusals and boundaries. I tried to stay calm and professional, but inside, I was panicking. I glanced nervously at the security cameras, hoping they would deter him from crossing the line. But the guy was relentless. He kept pushing, getting closer and closer until I could feel his breath on my neck. I was about to scream out for help when he suddenly backed off, flashing a creepy grin before leaving the store. I breathed a sigh of relief, but my relief was short-lived. A little while later, I heard a loud bang at the door. The sound really scared me. I gathered my nerves and slowly went over to see what was happening, and I froze in horror as I saw the same guy standing just inside the door, locking the entrance door with a menacing look on his face. Panic surged through me as I realized that I was trapped in the gas station with him. I ran behind the register and grabbed my phone and dialed 911, my hands shaking as I whispered my location and pleaded for help. But before I could finish, the man lunged at me, making me drop my phone. His intentions were clear as day. I screamed for help, desperately trying to fend him off as he pinned me against the counter. It was a terrifying struggle, a fight for survival as I fought against his relentless assault. Just when I thought I couldn't hold on any longer, I heard the sound of sirens approaching. A sense of hope washed over me and I could feel him loosen his grip on me. I then realized help was on the way. Moments later, police officers burst through the door, their presence a welcome relief. They quickly subdued the man, handcuffing him and leading him away as I collapsed in tears of relief and fear. It turned out that a customer who had stopped for gas had witnessed the man's attempted assault and had quickly called 911, alerting the authorities to the danger I was facing. As I sat there, shaken but safe, I just kept thinking about how close I had come to a terrible nightmare. It really was a wake-up call. I ended up leaving that job soon after. I just couldn't get past that terrifying night. It was around 2 a.m., and it was slow and quiet, something that I really looked forward to while working the night shift. I walked the store looking for anything that needed to be restocked and made a note of those items so that I could grab them from the stock area. As I was walking back, I heard the rumble of engines outside. I peered through the window and saw a group of men pulling up in a beat-up truck, their laughter carrying on the night breeze. Now let me tell you, these weren't your friendly neighborhood folks. No, sir. Not at all. These were the rowdy types, the kind where you just knew trouble was coming. I kept my eye on them as they sauntered into the store, their loud voices echoing off the walls. They were rough around the edges, with tattoos and worn-out clothes that screamed trouble. I greeted them with a forced smile, trying to keep things friendly despite the unease creeping up my spine. But as they browsed the aisles, I could sense their energy shifting, their eyes darting around like they were sizing up the place. I focused on my tasks, trying to ignore the growing tension in the air. But then I heard one of them whispering to the others, something about causing trouble and having some fun. I knew I had to tread carefully, so I kept my distance, pretending to be busy while keeping a watchful eye on their every move. It didn't take long for things to escalate. One of the men started knocking items off the shelves, laughing as he made a mess. Another one grabbed a handful of snacks and stuffed them into his pockets without paying. I tried to intervene, politely asking them to stop and reminding them of the consequences of their actions. But they just laughed in my face, their laughter growing louder and more menacing with each passing moment. I could feel the fear creeping in, but I knew I had to stay calm and composed. I reached in my back pocket for my phone to call the police, but one of the men snatched it out of my hand and threw it to the ground, shattering it into like a million pieces. I started to panic as I realized I was outnumbered and outmatched. These men had ill intent, and I was at their mercy. But just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, the unexpected happened. The leader of the group, a burly man with a menacing grin, pulled out a gun from his waistband and pointed it at me. My heart skipped a beat as I stared down the barrel of the gun, my mind racing with fear and desperation. I knew I had to think fast if I wanted to survive this nightmarish ordeal. But before the situation could escalate further, a bright light flooded the store as police cars pulled up outside. The sound of sirens filled the air, and the men's laughter turned into panicked shouts as they realized they were caught. They made a run for it, but the police were quick to apprehend them, their cuffs clicking shut as they were led away in shame. The police later told me that the group had just left a nearby bar after viciously beating up other patrons and almost destroying the place. The police were in the area looking for the men and spotted their truck at the gas station. As I stood there, shaken but relieved, I kept thinking about how close I had possibly come to a tragic end. I was traveling alone to visit my aunt, whom I hadn't seen in some years. I noticed my fuel gauge dipping dangerously low, so I pulled off the highway and into the nearest gas station I could find. The place looked deserted, with flickering lights and a sense of abandonment hanging in the air. I parked my car and headed inside anyway. After all, I needed some gas and to use the restroom. The bell above the door chimed as I entered, announcing my presence to the empty store. After I finished using the restroom, I grabbed a few snacks and headed to the counter to pay. But that's when I noticed a man standing in the corner, watching me with intense eyes. At first, I thought nothing of it. Maybe he was just another customer, I thought. But as I browsed the aisles, I got this feeling that I was being watched. Every time I glanced in his direction, he was there stalking me. His eyes never left me, creeping me out. I hurried through my purchase, eager to get back to the safety of my car, but as I walked out, I realized he was following me. I quickened my pace, trying to ignore the growing sense of dread in my gut. I fumbled with my keys, my heart pounding as I unlocked the car door and jumped inside. I started the engine and pulled out of the gas station, glancing in the rearview mirror to see if he was still there. Sure enough, his car pulled out behind me, tailing me with ominous persistence. I tried to lose him, taking turns and switching lanes, but he stayed right on my tail. I started to panic when I realized he wasn't just following me. He was following me with intent. I reached for my cell phone and dialed 911 and explained the situation to the dispatcher. They assured me that help was on the way, but in the meantime, I had to keep driving and stay safe. I drove for what felt like forever, the man's car a constant presence behind me. My heart raced with fear as I wondered what his intentions were. Was he just some creep, or was he planning something far worse? Suddenly, he sped up, swerving dangerously close to my car. I swerved to avoid him, my heart in my throat as he continued to pursue me with reckless abandon. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white as I fought to stay in control. But then, in a horrifying twist, he rammed into the back of my car, sending us both careening off the road. I screamed as my car spun out of control, crashing into a ditch with a sickening thud. The impact knocked the wind out of me, leaving me dazed and disoriented. Through the haze of pain, I saw the man approaching, a twisted grin on his face. He opened my door and reached for me, his eyes glinting with malice. But before he could grab me, I heard the sound of sirens approaching. The police had arrived, just in time to apprehend the man and rescue me from a potentially deadly situation. As they pulled me from the wreckage and handcuffed the man, I couldn't help but feel a wave of relief wash over me. I had escaped a nightmarish encounter by the skin of my teeth. But as I looked at the man's face, contorted with rage and madness, I realized that not everyone is as lucky. There are monsters out there, lurking in the darkness, waiting to strike when you least expect it. I shuddered at the thought, grateful to be alive but haunted by the memory of that terrifying night at the gas station. It was spring break, and I was driving solo to visit my family halfway across the country. I had been on the road for hours, the darkness outside broken only by the occasional headlights of passing cars. I was getting tired, so I decided to pull over at the next gas station I saw to get some gas, stretch my legs, and maybe grab a coffee. The gas station looked like any other, a small, dimly lit convenience store with a handful of cars parked outside. I parked my car and headed inside, eager to get a caffeine boost and be on my way. As I walked in, I noticed that the store was unusually quiet. There was only one other person inside, a burly man in a hoodie standing by the counter with his back to me. I thought nothing of it and made my way to the coffee machine. As I poured myself a cup, I heard raised voices coming from the front of the store. Curiosity getting the better of me, I peeked around the aisle and saw the man at the counter waving a gun, his voice low and menacing. "Give me all the cash and no one gets hurt," he growled, his eyes darting around the store. My heart skipped a beat as I realized what was happening, an armed robbery in progress, and I had walked right into it. I ducked back behind the aisle, my mind racing with fear and adrenaline. I had to think fast. I was scared out of my mind, but I knew that I couldn't just stand by and do nothing. But I also couldn't risk making things worse. I went to reach for my cell phone, but realized that I had left it in my car. My mind was racing, trying to figure out what to do next. By now, I could hear the man's voice growing more and more agitated. He was demanding the cashier to hurry up, his threats becoming more explicit with each passing second. I held my breath, praying for it to all be over soon. But then, to my horror, I heard footsteps approaching from behind me. I turned to see another figure standing there, a woman, her eyes wide with fear as she looked at me. "We have to do something," she whispered, her voice trembling. I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. We couldn't just sit back and let this happen. We had to try and stop him, or at least buy some time until the police arrived. I glanced around, searching for anything we could use as a distraction or a weapon. Then I spotted a display of cleaning supplies across the aisle from where we were. Without hesitation, I grabbed a can of aerosol cleaner and a lighter from my pocket. I looked at the woman, who nodded in understanding. We both took a deep breath and stepped out from behind the aisle, our makeshift weapons in our hands and ready. "Hey!" I shouted, catching the robber's attention. He turned toward us, his eyes widening in surprise as he saw the flames flickering from the makeshift flamethrower in my hand. "Back off!" I yelled, my voice trembling with adrenaline. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The man hesitated, unsure of what to do next. It was enough of a distraction for the cashier to hit the silent alarm, alerting the police to our location. Seconds felt like hours as we stood there, locked in a tense standoff. But then, sirens blared in the distance, growing louder with each passing moment. The man cursed under his breath and made a run for it, disappearing into the night just before the police arrived. I let out a shaky breath, feeling a rush of relief and disbelief wash over me. We had stopped the robbery, but at what cost? The police arrived soon after, taking our statements and commending us for our bravery. But as I drove away from that gas station, the events of that night replayed in my mind like a horror movie. I had unknowingly walked into a nightmare, but somehow I had emerged from it unscathed. It was definitely a night I'll never forget, and I am now really mindful of when I stop to get gas. I make sure to fill my tank during the day to hopefully avoid anything else like this from now on. Thanks for watching. Don't miss out on more spine-chilling tales. Subscribe now for weekly scares. Hit that red button and join our journey into the unknown.